So my English teacher in high school was named Mrs. Perry, and she was one of the hardest teachers I ever had. I remember when she was teaching us MLA formatting in a time before there was EasyBib or any of these websites where you could just put in the URL and it auto-generated it for you. I remember she used to have us take these manuals and figure out how to do MLA format based on this big thick book that we all had, and she was a hawk about it. If you forgot a comma or didn't capitalize the right thing, or you didn't demonstrate everything that you're supposed to demonstrate in citing your sources, she would mark you down and let you know it. I mean, she was a grammar freak. I mean, you could not misuse a semicolon in her class without her letting you know. But then she also would spend lots and lots of time teaching how to do these different concepts. And it was tedious. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't like it. And this is coming from somebody who would become an English major, who would have to use all of this stuff the rest of my academic career. And yet I hated so many moments of being in her class. I think about Mrs. Perry's class, and I think about how different she is than I am as a teacher. I'm an English teacher, I'm a writing teacher, and I do things a lot differently than that. I don't really harp on those details to the same level. I like to think big picture, like that 30,000 foot view when it comes to writing and creativity and putting your thoughts to page. And Mrs. Perry was all about the details and getting it perfect, creating something that is so well done that you don't distract your audience from what you're trying to do. Mrs. Perry was a very different teacher than me, and I didn't necessarily like her class. But I gotta tell you, when I write now, I strive for my writing to be perfect. It's not always perfect, but I kind of aim for that. And it's not just because Mrs. Perry made me, it's because she made me realize how distracting poor grammar can be. She helped me realize how important getting it right can be if I want to get my point across effectively. I remember the lessons she taught me 15, 20 years ago are still working themselves out in my own current work. She instilled in me this sense of perfection in my writing that I still use to this day. And so I look back at my time with her, and I think kind of as I exegete my own story, I wonder, was she a bad teacher? I don't think so. I think maybe she was actually an excellent teacher. Maybe she was a great teacher because she taught me things that are still being used and applied in my own work to this day, not just as a teacher, but as a communicator, as somebody who wants to get their ideas across in word and in verbal form like this. Mrs. Perry is constantly a part of my life now. And I just think about this, is that there's so many different types of teachers, right? There's so many different ways of getting ideas and practices and pedagogy across. There's so many ways of approaching the work you do with your students in the classroom. And it's not always fun for the students, right? It wasn't necessarily an enjoyable experience for me at all times in Mrs. Perry's class, and yet her specific pedagogy was absolutely effective. And I've talked to many people from high school who had Mrs. Perry's class, and it seems to be a similar sentiment. They didn't always love the rigorous work of using those MLA handbooks. They didn't always love having to be so precise in their writing. But it's undoubtedly the unanimous word I've heard from so many friends from high school is that Mrs. Perry is one of the greatest teachers they ever had, because Mrs. Perry demanded excellence and she led you and taught you in a way that you found it. And so the reason I tell this story is because you might be unconventional, or maybe you do things a certain way that doesn't always connect at the time, but you feel this conviction that the way you teach and how you teach is effective, and maybe you've seen the fruits of that later on. And so I want to encourage you to continue to follow those convictions and continue to teach in ways that meet your students where they're at and give them what they absolutely need, the kind of things that stick with them years and years later.